page 4/6 تاريخ القومية العربية. The third paragraph. The presenter is talking about the Arab unity and refers to the الوحدة المصرية السورية as an example of, or an outcome of the Arab nationalism. And there is discussion about the ideological thought and the Arab nationalism. And in the last 3 lines of the paragraph, there is reference to Michel Aflaq, who was one of the thinkers of the Hizb al-Ba'ath al-Arabi. And the motto or the slogan was وحدة حرية اشتراكية. Last 3 lines I will read. ودخلت الاشتراكية كمكون أساسي للقومية العربية. أن التحول الاشتراكي إلى الفكر القومي عمليا أنهى نوع من العلاقة الحميمة بين الإسلام وبين القومية، ودخلت الآن الفكر الاشتراكي والماركسية حلت محل ذلك النوع من التقارب الإسلامي القومي. ما رأيك في هذا التحليل؟ Is everybody with me? Okay, page 4/6. Okay, everybody with me? Okay. Okay, all right. So, what's important here is to note that with Michel Aflaq in his talk and the Ba'ath Party, on the motto or the slogan وحدة وحرية واشتراكية. Why is اشتراكية مهم? Important in this relation of the development of the thought, and why here is the question that whether it shifts from having some sort of Islamic reference to a more socialist reference. And we read تأثير الاشتراكية with the last paragraph. تأثير الاشتراكية على العلاقة بين الإسلام والقومية. ياسر سليمان هو الماركسية دخلت في فترة لاحقة، يعني فيما بعد الستينات أو السبعينات بدأت الماركسية تدخل من باب الاشتراكية. هذا كان أحد المواضيع التي ستحقق دراسة أكثر مما أتيح لها بهذا الكتاب، لأنه هناك فيه مواجهة ما بين التاريخ العربي الإسلامي التي تطرح كمشكلة أساسية كمشكل أساسي للقومية العربية وبين ما يجري على أرض الواقع. أعتقد أن الاشتراكية مع أنها أعطت مجالا لبث الفكر القومي العربي، إلا أن هناك محاولات أيضا أخرى تقول بأن الإسلام لا يختلف عن الاشتراكية في موضوع إعطاء الناس حقوقها، وهذا كلام جميع بأن الاشتراكية كانت عبارة عن تطور كان لابد منه في القومية العربية لمحاولة الاشتراك الجماهير العربية في مشروع القومية العربي في مصر وفي سوريا. طيب. What do you think is the role of socialism in development of the Arab thought or Arab nationalism? Any ideas? Okay, but why the shift? If there's to make a shift, what makes the shift? Okay, we can mark this page, and we will go on to read Aflaq. It's important to we will extract some idea or get some idea about what is being meant here from Aflaq's article القومية العربية والنظرية القومية. Okay, which is right after the article. It was an attempt to stand in face of the colonial capitalism. Yes, but why? You had non-socialist movements to try to counter colonialism. So what? Why the socialist aspect of it? So we come to Michel Aflaq's article, and he makes a distinction between what are adjectives or characteristics of nationalism. Arab nationalism, and what should Arab nationalism be able to do within the current context of liberating from colonialism in the 50s, and how to change and make what is possible or design your futures. Okay. So if we begin with the first, I will read. أن اصطلاح القومية العربية في استعمال الشائع اليوم هو خليط من أفكار واتجاهات سياسية وعواطف ورواسب وانحرافات سلبية ومن رواسب وانحرافات سلبية إيجابية جعلته بعيدا عن المعنى الصادق الخلاق الذي يوحي به، بحيث نرى القومية تارة مرادفة للتعصب والتوسع، وتارة أخرى مقيدة في إغلال من العنصر أو الدين أو التاريخ، أو مساوية للوحدة والرفض والتجزئة أو لوحدة النضال الشعبي، مع أن هذه المعاني كلها السلبية والإيجابية عارضة متبدلة جزئية، والقومية هي وحدة الخالدة الثابتة الشاملة. So هون التركيز على مثلا الاتجاهات السياسية، المراحل التاريخية إلى حد ما، وبرضه عواطف، ولكن ليس it is not an instrument from which to change one's reality or predicament. And in the Ba'ath, then he says that the nationalism, according to the Ba'ath, هي واقع بديهي يفرض نفسه دون حاجة إلى النقاش أو نضال. أما مجال الاختلاف وضرورة النضال فهما ما في محتوى هذا القانون. Okay, so here in the role of the Ba'ath with their socialist idea or approach to nationalism is that it's an active thought or process or organization. It is not just describing what are the characteristics. It is part of making change, and therefore introducing the change component into the nationalism is something that is dynamic and active. Okay, and that therefore, according to the Ba'ath, there is no need to kind of discuss about what are the components of nationalism. The main discussion should be directed to how do you make it something that is active, that is effective, that changes a situation towards the better and gets away from being dependent or dominated or under the hegemony of former colonial powers or new dominant powers. And the third paragraph, ولذلك فرق الحزب منذ تأسيسه بين الفكرة العربية وعنينا بها القومية العربية وبين النظرية القومية. فقال أن الفكرة العربية هي بديهية خالدة وهي قدر محبب وأنها حب قبل كل شيء. أما النظرية القومية فهي تعبير متطور عن هذه الفكرة خالدة حسب الزمان والظروف، وأن هذه النظرية تتمثل اليوم حسب اعتقادنا في الحرية والاشتراكية والوحدة, which are the three components we mentioned in the last article. وبهذا التفريق تتسع القومية العربية لكل هذا الواقع الغني الممتد عبر عصور التاريخ في جميع أقطارنا، فهي تحت قدم هذا التاريخ وتتغذى به وتؤلف من عناصره المختلفة تجربة واحدة موحدة، فهي بذلك الصفة المشتركة التي تجمع عناصر وحقبا تاريخية متعددة تشملها جميعا ولا تصطدم بها بأي منها. So what's the addition that he's coming with, or that the path with the socialism is coming? It's presenting a theory, not just describing. So it is moving from descriptive characteristics to a theory of how to activate nationalism. Okay, but it's based on learning from the past and merging the past with the present to understand the present, and then by understanding the present from the lessons of the past to design a future which is better and which brings together and activates a collective identity of being part of a nation, the Arab nation, and therefore by introducing, transforming or making the distinction between the idea of being Arab, the Arab idea, or the idea or the theory of nationalism, there is a difference in what is describes characteristics, and again what describes a process which can be activated. Now, why was there a need to go to socialism? As I explained at some point before, that Marxism provides a methodology. Marx was a philosopher, theorist, and also developed a way to produce revolutions. So in this sense, Marxism provided a means to analyze history, to analyze the problems in society, and to identify where the problems are derived from. In this case, he focused on the problem of capitalism being that those who control the means of production abuse the rights of the workers, and therefore that creates tension and problem in society. And therefore the problem is capitalism as it is as a way of organizing economics to achieve maximum profit regardless of the rights of others, particularly the workers. So therefore the problem, his solution was that the workers should take hold of the means of production and therefore collectivize the ownership of the means of production and therefore benefit from the production equitably. Yeah. And the way, the methodology of arriving at this deduction has to do with the thesis, antithesis, and for everything there is a counter, and the reaction of the one thing with another produces a third thing or a third reality, which cannot be reproduced or broken back to its original situation or original case. And therefore, there's a sequence of interaction, social interaction, that produces a new reality. Now, the Arab nationalism, according to the Ba'ath Party, in its descriptive form, is not able to change a reality based on a methodological analysis of the past, and therefore a methodological analysis of the present. So why they bring in the socialist component is to bring in the methodology for which to understand the past, the happenings of the past, and understand what the present is, and therefore with that to understand what to change of the present, so as to be able to design and produce the desired future of Arab national unity. And therefore, then we move to the second paragraph on page 2/4 from Aflaq. وبهذا المعنى فقط يأخذ التاريخ قوميتنا. التاريخ بالدرجة الأولى والتاريخ العام بالدرجة الثانية، فنحن ندخل التاريخ في قوميتنا ليكون صورة وقدوة، بل لأنه التربة الحية التي نما فيها وعينا وتصحح وتكامل، حتى بلغ هذه المرحلة الحضارة التي نعبر فيه عن قوميتنا الإيجابية بكليتها، والتي لا مكان فيها التمييز أو التفوق أو السيطرة والعزلة أو العزلة. So this new approach to nationalism is one that does not go to history just to describe the sequence of events, but rather to extract the meanings and lessons from the past. And therefore, the history becomes also something that is brought life into. And therefore, the life of that history is also induced in the life of the present, and therefore, if you follow the sequence of analysis and the methodology, therefore you shape also your future. Okay. The other paragraph: وليس المهم أن تكون شتى المعاني السلبية والإيجابية كالعنصر والدين والتراث والتاريخي قد أسهمت في الماضي صنع هذه القومية وتداخلت فيها، ولكن المهم هو المعنى الذي نستخرجه من ذلك في مرحلتنا الحاضرة. And therefore, you need, according to this approach, to the Ba'athist approach, you need to take history and make it meaningful. And it depends on what meanings you extract from history. You can extract negative meanings, you can extract positive meanings. The idea is that if you take the negative and the positive, and then you kind of develop into what you want the future to be based on what is positive, and to activate even in shaping more positiveness into the positive that you have extracted from the lessons of history. And therefore, he's talking about creating an Arab future, okay, which is quite different from just describing what makes you Arab, and therefore you follow a line of being activated by the happenings and activated by history, rather than being active and shaping the history. Future meaning modernism? No, not necessarily. It just means future. what the future would hold, whether it be modernism or something else, has a different needs more discussion. But here we're just talking about a future in which you have agency. We talk about one of the components of structural power is that the human has agency rather than being a recipient and activated upon. يعني بدل ما يكون الشخص أو الإنسان مفعول به يكون الفاعل. وقد يكون مفعول من التاريخ، بس الفكرة هون نصفي فاعل في استخلاص العبر من التاريخ، وفاعل في تشخيص الحاضر، وفاعل في تشكيل المستقبل بناء على ما مستمد من الماضي حاضر مستقبل الأصيل. Okay. وبالتالي in this paragraph he kind of highlights what are important in the concept of nationalism. إنه the first aspect المهم هو المعنى الذي نستخرجه من التاريخ، والمهم أن نعرف أن هذه القومية the third line from the third paragraph التي وصفناها بالخلود وبأنها تفترق عن المضامين المختلفة التي تعبر بها عن نفسها خلال الزمن وبالتفاعل مع الحوادث والظروف، لا يعني الخلود فيها جمود، وإنما يعني الثبات والاستمرار للحد الأدنى من المقومات تبنى عليها وتنسج حولها تعبير متنوعا متجددا، تعبيرات متنوعة متجددة هي خلق دائم، ولكنها ليست خلقا مجردا ولا خلقا من العدم، بل نابتا من التجارب الحية، لأن هذا هو الذي يعطيه قوة ويضمن استمرار حيويته وتكامله. ولذلك فنحن نعتبر أن التجربة الحاضرة للأمة العربية هي القيمة الأولى والكبرى لهذه القومية، لأنها أغنى وأثمن من جميع المراحل التي عاشتها أمتنا في الماضي، وبالتالي فإن مجال التجدد والخلق مفتوح أمامنا الآن بكل اتساعه لتعطي لقوميتها المعاني الحرة الأصيلة التي توحي بها تجربتها الحاضرة بكل عمقها وعنفها، وتخلع بالتالي على تجاربها الماضي معنى جديدا. فهي بهذه المعنى تخلق المستقبل وتخلق الماضي نفسه، وهي بالتالي أي هذه التجربة تترك في الصف الثاني أكثر المعاني السلبية أو الإيجابية التي تدخل عادة في بناء القومية وترفعها فوق النظرة التاريخية، كما تجنبنا النظرة الأممية المجردة. So what is the point? There are several points here. The point being that you, by understanding the history, in a way you recreate your perception of history in the sense that you're able to make it something that is lived and works for you rather than works against you. And the point being that there is a linkage between your past and present and future, and there's a process again in which you design your future based on how you benefit from the past. It's important to highlight that in this paragraph he's also talking about causality, is that you do something and therefore you're able to shape your present and future. Yeah, and which is something that is not available if you go by just the components of what it is to be Arab in the descriptive sense, like your language, your history, culture, and being on the same geographical context as well as the Islamic reference culture or a cultural reference or religious reference. والعرب اليوم لا يريدون أن تكون قوميتهم عنصرية، وإرادتهم هذه نابعة من تجربتهم، فقد جربوا ما معنى العنصرية وجربوا ما معنى الظلم. And therefore, this type of nationalism is not one that is as I said, isolates the Arabs from the rest of the world, but there is a particular experience of the Arab region with regard to colonialism and liberation and or independence, and therefore this is what this region or this type of nationalism brings and contributes to the other nationalisms that occur elsewhere in the world. And therefore, it reminds us of the values of the French Revolution. Is that it's a human project. It's not just a French project. Okay, it's calling for after Aflaq, you have the Declaration of the Human Rights and Civic Rights of 1798, and therefore the project is not just a regional project. It's trying to get the region to be active and to activate in designing the present, interpreting the past, present, and designing the future, but not to be antagonistic with other nations of the world, but to join, so to speak, to join in solidarity or to join forces with other peoples or nations that have gone through similar situations of colonialism and neo-colonialism and the like. والعرب لا يريدون أن تكون قوميتهم. I'm on page 3-4 from Aflaq. والعرب اليوم first paragraph. والعرب اليوم لا يريدون أن تكون قوميتهم دينية، لأن الدين له مجال آخر وليس هو الرابط للأمة، بل هو على العكس قد يفرق بين القوم الواحد، وقد يورث حتى لو لم يكن هناك فروق أساسية بين الأديان نظرة متعصبة وغير واقعية. And therefore, what he's calling for is a nationalism that is not based on religion, which could have a dividing factor. Okay, so he says he has 3 paragraphs of العرب لا يريدون for last paragraph of page 2, first 2 paragraphs of page 3, and then he says على أن قومية بالرغم من so the second paragraph العرب لا يريدون أن تكون قومية تاريخية. And therefore, not in the sense not to benefit from the past, but rather just to describe the events of the past without extracting lessons from the past. على أن قوميتنا third paragraph بالرغم من هذه المرونة وهذا الشمول تبقى قومية ذات شخصية، فهي لكي تستوعب التراث القديم العديد المتنوع ولكي تتفاعل مع الحضارة الإنسانية. Note that he is talking about the human civilization as well. It's not just a regional or a geographic confined civilization. يجب أن تكون لها شخصية, which means that there will be an Arab characteristic to this, but it's not repulsive of others. ونحن نسمى عربا هذه المجموعة من البشر التي استلمت من الماضي تلك المقومات والشروط الابتدائية والضرورة للشعور المشترك والمصلحة المشتركة، لا لتقف عند هذه الحد، بل كمقتضى تبدأ منها حياة جديدة تملأها بكل الأثر الإنسانية التي توحي بها أو تدفع إليها تجربتنا الحاضرة. And therefore, from our experience, it becomes a launching board for being able to present and contribute to humanity in a better way, and human civilization in a better way. والقومية, last paragraph, والقومية بمفهوم الحديث. Therefore, what he's proposing as a قومية in the modern sense هي التي بمعنى القفز إلى العالمية بمعنى القفز إلى عالمية مائعة ومجردة تقي من الانتكاس والرجوع إلى العصبيات الصغيرة، فهي إذن تحفظ شخصية الإنسان من التمييع ومن التضاؤل. إن مفهوما للماركسية يدعو إلى العالمية ويعتبر القومية انتكاسا، مع أنها في الواقع حركة تقدمية. Okay. Marx considered nationalism as something that prevents the establishment of a world working class, whereas Aflaq here and the Ba'ath Party have their own interpretation that no, nationalism can be a driving force for change. It need not be a hindrance from assuming global significance. And here he's also saying that he links it up to a global movement or an international movement in which you move away from being isolated and ethnocentric to being humanistic and inclusive, including others, bearing in mind your own specific experiences and lessons learned from history, and therefore how to advance. طيب إن مفهوم again second line إن مفهوما للماركسية يدعو إلى العالمية ويعتبر القومية انتكاسا، مع أنها في الواقع حركة تقدمية. هون المفارقة بين اجتهاد حزب البعث العربي والمفارقة مع ماركس لأنها حررت الإنسان من العصبية الصغيرة وارتفعت به إلى روابط أوسع لها من نضجها ومن قيامها على أساس إنسانية، ما يجعلها خيرا من أن تهدم القومية لتدفع الإنسان إلى عالمية دفعا مصطنعا وسطحيا، ويصبح ضائعا في هذا العالم ويحتاج إلى قوة تجريد جبارة ليحفظ على نفسه إيمانها بصفة المواطن العالمي هذه، وهو وضع سيعود بالإنسان حتما إلى نوع من العصبيات الصغيرة. طيب. Apart from focusing on the context of being part of humanity or a larger human civilization, he's pushing the idea or urging or promoting the idea that with well, I'll come back to your comments when I I want to finish this idea. Is that developing nationalism should be emerge from your immediate history, lessons, and geographical context and happenings. But once you start conversing or discussing or interacting with the rest of the world that has similar experiences, you need to be able to have a depth in theory and in depth in analysis, which is able to communicate with others. Otherwise, if you haven't developed this depth of analysis, which links you with other nations who have gone through the same, say, colonial experiences or domination experiences, then you from fear or from insecurity, you fall back into your exclusive nationalism and you isolate yourself, because that is safer intellectually and because that's where one would feel safe. The point he's making is that no, it needs to evolve from specific geographic, historical experiences and context, and be able to carry a depth which enables it to interact and link with other experiences, similar experiences in other parts of the world without losing its character and without becoming insecure. And therefore, what he's proposing is more depth and analysis and theorizing of how to what Arab nationalism should contain within. Okay, I'm going to read some of the notes. It was was appealing to Jamal Abdel Nasser's nationalism was that he was rectifying or bringing back honor and dignity in face of the defeat of 48 and what happened. So therefore, what the Aflaq is trying to do is develop, pushing the intellectuals or the thinkers to take a more active role in explaining what it is to be nationalism beyond just the characteristics, superficial characteristics, and that the level of depth that is involved or invested into this thought should make people here or within the nationalism, Arab nationalism context, be able to identify and link with other nations who have gone through the same thing. Now, obviously, if you want to bring this awareness to the whole region or the people of the region at the time, you need to be able to read. You need to be able to understand complex text, and therefore you need to be able to elevate the analytical ability of the people, of the whole people of the region in general, to that level. Now, one way of doing that is making them members of a party. If the party has an ideology, therefore the members become aware and become skillful and are able to use the ideology or the methodology of that party to understand what is happening and where the party is heading towards. If you are not versed or familiar with this literature and what the ideas and the methodology of analyzing and all this kit, the package that you have, then it becomes more difficult to kind of bring in the whole community. And why is it important to elevate, to lift the awareness of the people, so that the whole project is not focused on one person, so that there is a system or a party or a group, a larger group that has within it a political order and intellectual or methodology of understanding, deriving lessons from the past, understanding the present, and shaping the future, and is not just emotionally attached to the accomplishments of one person against colonizing powers, which sometimes are successful and sometimes are not. In 1956, Jamal Abdel Nasser was able to withstand the attack from Israel, France, and Britain, but was not able to withstand the attack from the 67, from one of the three. So therefore, and if there's a movement, the movement should be able to continue despite achievements and failures. It is not just one. You can have several achievements, but one failure destroys the whole project. When we go to, when you read the literature about Latin America and Central America, you have 300 years of trial and error and trying to come up with a regional coalition of Central American states. And they went on with it despite the fluctuations of powers during the 300 years. And the momentum for today's or the the past decade, the attempt to re-establish or revitalize the coalition of Central American states or Latin American states it derives from the experience of 300 years and the ideas and of being independent from American hegemony and then also colonial control. Okay, when you have a less kind of politically mature group of people, therefore you more fluctuate depending on what is popular and what is not popular. Okay. One day one can be very popular, but with one mistake, then the whole thing, then the whole process becomes unpopular, without distinguishing between the person and the whole process as a whole. Okay, so failure is if you just as an example, failure is a happening. It is not a person. Okay. And therefore, this kind of distinction between happenings and processes and from the person who is the agency or who is associated with the failure or success is not clear in the intellectual, in the kind of general public at the time. So this is why AFLAC was promoting a party approach, which the members would then become more aware. I'm reading more notes from your comments. Okay. With regard to Renan, does this mean that you imagine your history and therefore it is an imagined community? No, here it is. You extract lessons from history, and this is the lessons you extract. They are not imaginations. Okay, you have objective material, or so you have material from the past which you derive lessons. Now, how you focus in shaping the lessons depends on where you come from. Sometimes if you have a preconceived idea about something, therefore you project that preconception on the analysis of what lessons should be learned. If you're doing it methodologically and objectively, you need to kind of move out from preconceptions, and therefore, if you have something preconception, first you need to sift through your preconception and see if it's valid or not. If it's valid, then you have substantiated it. If it is not, then you need to reposition your point of reference from which you begin to analyze. Okay. This is important when we talk about aql wal aqliya. If you can use your mind or your rationality to kind of sift through and dissect and sort out what components of events or happenings or sequence of happenings. But if it means that the conclusion that you derive challenges your preconcept, your mentality, then objectively, then your mentality should change according to what you learn from history. Yeah? Not that your lessons from history, the ceiling of what you are able to learn from history depends on the ceiling of your mentality. And this is where the rationality should kind of be able to penetrate your mental ceiling, your mentality ceiling of awareness, which is why you're learning, you go to university and learn more abstract forms of analyzing. In this case, history, present, politics, and social sciences and all the other parts. Comes with the democratization, globalization and liberalism and modernism. Okay, Maher, you comment that nationalism comes along with democratization, globalization, liberalism, and into modernism. Therefore, one cannot abolish the fact that nationalism, in terms terms of Marxism and socialism isn't that equivalent. Comes along with democratization. Okay. Globalization, no. It can have, if nationalism comes from democratization and globalization, nationalism and globalization are contradictions. Okay? If you emerge your nationalism or national identity into a thought process, a methodological process, and also a process of shaping, then it assumes that you need to include as much as possible of the people, which has the component of democratization. But democratization not in the form of political systems. It's democratization also of awareness. That awareness is not exclusive to a particular group of intellectuals. No, that it becomes more prevalent and more available. Now, that nationalism with the democratization can have a global context. Yes, this is what Aflaq is talking. That you eventually, after you've analyzed your region, your history, then you need to see where it fits into the history of humanity and where it fits into other geographical locations, which might be going through similar, if not the same, challenges. Yeah, but no two places are similar. So therefore, there's always some sort of distinction. However, this distinction or kind of differences need not be reasons to kind of repel from one another, rather than to merge with one another. Globalization is a way of from top down, in which you have the powerful reshaping the local according to the needs of the powerful in the globalization process. It is not. It is the opposite of what Aflaq is calling for, which is a nationalism which is based on trying to achieve justice, social justice in the region, based on your history and your present situation and your aspirations for the future, but that your aspirations of the present and the future also link up with the aspirations of present and future of other regions, so that you form an alliance. And therefore, you may have global. You need to be mature. You need to evolve from a regional context into a global context, which does not mean that you are become dominated by the globalization, quote unquote, which is a tool of the powerful of the world against the weak and the formerly colonized. Okay, abolish the fact that nationalism, internal Marxism, and socialism is that equivalent. Okay. Why does Aflaq talk about social ishtiraki? He doesn't talk about shuyu'i. In the 50s, you had these thinkers from the colonized regions disagreeing with Marx's analysis that in order for there to be a change on the global level, you need to have a working class. China kind of deviated from this strict Marxist analysis that you need a working class. China said that, okay, rather than have a working class that unites, you have the farmers, the peasants of China, the farmers of China should unite, because they didn't have any working class. So therefore, Marxism as a means and as a methodology was adapted to the situation of the context. And therefore, you also had in Africa and in the Arab world and elsewhere in Latin America, you had modifications of Marxism from its strict sense of relying on a working class into, say, peasants and intellectuals, and merging and coming with different combinations of how all these would work together towards liberation. Yeah, not just independence, but towards liberation. And therefore, you could have a group of formerly colonized uniting together for a better world and more equitable economic interaction, rather than one that is globalism is promoting, which how would you say, which dissolves your national identity or your context, and draws you into something which is more abstract and global, but without having your without having the agency component that you would have if you would have a matured approach to what it is to interact with the globe, with the other regions. Okay. Last two paragraphs 4 of 4. So القومية في مفهومنا هي محررة من خطر الانغماس والاستسلام لعوامل البيئة والظروف والاجتماعية المحلية. And therefore it is not the nationalism in the Aflak's sense is active. It is not passive. It is فاعل. It is not مفعول به. And therefore it has an component of liberation. محررة من خطر الانغماس والاستسلام. ومحررة أيضا من خطر الانقلاب في جو الحياة بكاملها ومن الوقوع في التجريد. ذلك أن في القومية الحد المعقول من التجريد الذي يجعل المصري والسوري واليمني عربا، وهذا لا يمنع أن يشعر العربي بأنه إنسان وبأنه له رسالة مشتركة مع بقية البشر، ولكن ضمن كونه عربيا صلته بالآخرين والتعاون معهم إنما يتمان من خلال شخصيته العربية. So which is what I explained, is that there is a level of abstraction that you need to unite Arabs living in different localities in Syria or Yemen or Egypt or elsewhere. And that is, for example, the colonial experience, in addition to the history and the collective history and culture and language and other. But this does not mean that you then become racist in the sense that you become nationalist in the sense that you detach yourself from the rest of humanity. No, the more you become aware of who you are, the more you should be able to interact with other nations while maintaining your own character, and without feeling insecure that you were overwhelmed by the interaction on the areas beyond your locality. وأخيرا فإن قوميتنا لا تزول بإرادتنا، ولكنها في الوقت نفسه لا تستمر ولا تحققا كاملا بدون هذه الإرادة. And therefore he says that the nationalism that they're calling for is one that is it doesn't disappear by your will, but at the same time it should not by the same time it cannot continue without having will, and therefore agency, and therefore being active. أي أن فيها إمكانيات التفسخ والتناثر، كما أن فيها إمكانيات الوحدة والانسجام والنضج. So therefore, it has the forces within which can segregate and differentiate and isolate, but it also has the components of uniting and being cohesive and to be, I would say, mature in the sense of thought mature and identity mature, collective identity mature. القومية العربية ليست مرحلة نضال مشترك أو شعار لهذا المرحلة تنتهي بانتهاء النضال أو بانتهاء الوعي يعود كل قطر بعد ذلك شخصيته الخاصة. And it's not a means towards just one end, and once you've achieved the end, you stop being Arab, and therefore you go back into your localities. No, it's a much part of a much larger process, which continuously needs reactivating, reinvigorating, and agency. أما نحن فنجد نهايتها في فشل هذا النضال إذا كانت لها نهاية، ولا صح أن تقول أن في هذا الفشل انتكاسا وتقهقرا لها، وما دمنا نؤمن بأن الأقطار العربية هي في حالة ثورة وتقدم وتفتح فنضالها متزايد، ووضوح شخصيتها العربية الموجودة متزايدة أيضا بنسبة نجاح نضالها. So therefore, the clarity of the future depends on the persistence of struggle. هو اليوم في الواقع الشعار القومية العربية المتفتحة المنبعثة من جديد، فهي التي خلقت هذا النضال وهي التي تغذي. And therefore, there's a mutual interaction between what created nationalism and and feeding it together. So therefore, like Tilly, who talks about the war-making, state-making, and the diagram, and therefore there's a rational causality with all this. What Aflaq is proposing is that there would also be a causation and a causality and a methodology and the rationale for sequence of events and sequencing activities towards making change, towards a better future, without being isolated from the rest of the world, but rather interacting with the rest of the globe and other regions, as well as and then but the difference here is that while in Tilly, in the European sense, you make states and by making war, here you're making a nation by adopting liberation activity and being active and reclaiming agency, for yourself and then your locality, developing a level of abstraction which enables you to collectively in different parts of this region have a unified view or working towards a unified goal, and therefore on a more abstract level, on the global level, to be able to interact with other similar nations, communities, peoples that are going through or have gone through the same and are trying to achieve same outcomes. Okay. So we come back then to the article about Choueiri and Jalis. He talks about that he, as a comment, he says that at some point the Islamist, the last line of the third paragraph on page 4/6 is that when he poses a question, this is الحروب, دخول دكتور يوسف الشويري second to last line في الكتاب أن دخول الاشتراكية إلى الفكر القومي عمليا أنها نوع من العلاقة الحميمة بين الإسلام وبين القومية، ودخلت الآن الفكر الاشتراكي والماركسية حلت محل ذلك النوع من التقارب الإسلامي القومي، وأن تأثير الاشتراكية على العلاقة بين الإسلام والقومية والماركسية دخلت في فترة لاحقة ما بعد الستينات والسبعينيات بدأت الماركسية تدخل من باب الاشتراكية. هذا كان أحد المواضيع التي تستحق الدراسة. Third line from the last paragraph at the end في بث الفكرة القومية العربية، إلا أنه هناك محاولات أيضا أخرى تقول بأن الإسلام لا يختلف عن الاشتراكية في موضوع إعطاء الناس حقوقها، وهذا بالتالي هون the point here or the comment here is that if socialism provides redistribution of wealth, then how is it different from Islam, which also provides some sort of redistribution of wealth? Okay, but this would be kind of a superficial way of analyzing both. Now, this brings us to the question that, okay, if you reach this point where there was a shift in the evolution of Arab national thought from an Islamic context to a more instrumental methodological means, which the socialist approach provided, then where do you reach is there a balance between both, or is there a way to kind of derive a methodology from the Islamic cultural context and history? And this is why we go then into Tarabishi about the causation and causality. If socialism is clear about causation and methodology and reclaiming agency, then on the how do you kind of resolve that with a worldview that kind of accepts that yes, there is to some extent there is some sort of agency, but the agency that you claim is part of an agency of a divine, and therefore it is part of the will of a greater being, and therefore how do you extract an Islamic version of methodology and causation and agency? Okay. What else do we need to cover? So, do you need a break, or are you fine? Are you with me still? Any questions? Or even thoughts? No, so far. Okay. Who is confused? What is confusing? Rima. If you want to have a okay, can you identify what is confusing? Just getting lost between so much information. Oh, that's all. Okay. Yeah, it is deep, and to try to sort yourself. Yeah, okay, it's a challenge. More so since we're doing it online. But yes, it's something you need to unconfuse yourself out of as you gradually kind of digest the material. Okay. So it's it's quite complex what we're trying to do. I will try when we go into Tarabishi. Now, I think the next thing we will do is go into Tarabishi. Is to try to kind of explain what the challenges are and what the differences are in Western European evolution of thought, which kind of made causation and rational deduction part of what they claim monopoly of knowledge of what it is, what reality is. Okay, and this is that is one version of how they designed reality and interpreted it, and how they kind of reflect reality through rational thinking and through the mind. And then there's our region, which is a bit more complicated. We need to go back to the article about the Qawmiyya. We didn't finish it yet. So on the page 6 of 6, Tarikh al-Qawmi al-Arabi, which is before Aflaq's article. Yeah, we come to the discussion about the book that they're talking about, and a second line from the top towards the end. الوضع الحالي الآن اللي هي يعني نقرأ مكونات معالم الفكر القومي جديدة، وهذا التجديد هو الذي استدعى إلى استقدام الاشتراكية كنوع من التجديد. لكن دكتور يوسف، إذا انتقلنا للفصل الأخير التي يتحدث عن العروب الجديدة، وهذا الفصل مهم ومثير جدا لأنه يتحدث عن الوضع الحالي الآن، العروب الجديدة اللي تتضمن الديمقراطية والحقوق الإنسان والمجتمع المدني والطروحات الحديثة. وهناك وعي down 2 lines towards the end of وهناك وعي جديد لحقوق الإنسان، وأصبحت هذه مفاهيم مكونات أساسية. وإنه towards the middle, if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, on the 11th line from the top، وهو تبني بأن القومية الآن أصبحت خارج أنظمة الحكم وفي صفوف المعارضة في الغالب من البلدان. Everybody with me? 11th line from the beginning، وأنه القومية الجديدة هاي أصبحت خارج أنظمة الحكم وفي صفوف المعارضة في الغالب في البلدان. And then count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from that line 5 down, and then you have وليست في داخل الدول العربية الواحدة، فهي عبارة عن محاولة التفاف حول المشروع القومي العربي لإعادته إلى الساحة العربية. Everybody with me? Okay. How is this a leap? You remember that at the beginning of the articles they talk about 4 or 5 phases in which the Arab nationalism went through. There's the pre-Islamic Qawmiyya, then there's the one that was shaped by Islam, then there was the one that evolved with the development of nationalism in Europe, and then its effect on, say, this region at the late 19th century towards working against the Ottoman rule. And then there was the post-World War I, Sykes-Picot, and we also bear in mind Fromkin's chapter introduction, in which he talked about the beginning, the introduction of the book, The Peace to End All Peace. And then in the mid-50s, you have this kind of revitalization of Arab nationalism in its either Nasri component or in the ideological Ba'athi component. And then the last version or last phase is now Al-Urub al-Jadid, which is focuses on democracy, human rights, civil society, and which seem to be outside the context of the political systems, and therefore and not necessarily enclosed in the Arab states. So how is this a leap? From 2-3 sessions ago, we talked about where is the leap. How to put the question another way, how should the discussion of nationalism in this article or this book review have gone? Do you find it analytical or descriptive? Okay, if it's analytical, where's the leap? Think about what Aflaq was trying to say. Anyone? Okay. If this was supposed to be an analytical exercise, then the methodological way of kind of approaching such a topic would have been to try to extract the lessons from each phase of the 4 or 5 phases. Yeah, and therefore, from the extraction of the 4 or 5 phases, you then come up with a proposition of what the current phase should be. Yeah, this is if you're doing it methodologically, but the leap is that you come from pre-Islamic, Islamic, then emergence of nationalism, and then the effect on that on this region post World War I, the Sykes-Picot situation, and then the mid-50s you have the 60s you have the nationalism of the Nasrist and the Ba'athi, and then now you have this kind of democracy, human rights, and civil society. The last part, it seems like each part is isolated from the previous part, and therefore there is no continuity in deriving lessons, which is an intellectual flaw. Is that even though there's analysis, the analysis is still under the umbrella of description of what it is, rather than understanding the dynamics of what it should be. Yeah. And therefore, what Aflaq is proposing is not being adopted by those who are analyzing this book review. Even though, to be fair, this is just a program analyzing a book. Yeah, it is not a substantive conference about nationalism. Yeah. So that aside, but the idea is that each phase is although there is some reference that they are linked together, but they do not try to extract how they are linked together and how it evolves. Even if there are certain sequences or sections in history which seem separate, the intellectual exercise is to try to extract lessons which, from the separate phases, are kind of merged into a comprehensive lesson, and therefore where you can derive from the comprehensive phases, the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth, or no matter how many phases, you extract some sort of derived lessons which you kind of enrich how you understand your present, and therefore develop where you're going into the future. Now, when you go, identifying or describing the last phase goes into something that has nothing to do with learning lessons from history or extracting lessons from history. It's just taking what are components of what makes you human in the international sphere and trying to inject them into a society again. And therefore, the point being here to try to reactivate what it is to be nationalism. Now, you cannot, in a way, it is not genuine, because what this means is that the last phase is one in which you're trying to take the components out of your regional context, which has not derived from your regional context, and try to kind of infuse them into your society here, and hoping that the society with these human rights and democratization and civil society and outside the political system of the systems of the region would then by some means or by some chance evolve into some sort of reactivation or rebooting of a nationalist project. So this is the leap. The leap is that the last phase is not a sequence of the previous phase. It is kind of an alien phase which comes into into the analysis of nationalism, and that it tries to reactivate nationalism without kind of deriving lessons from the past. But is Arab nationalism blended with the culture of Islam or Arabs or concepts? Okay. Yeah. Okay. The Nariman's point is that his point is that Arab nationalism can't be nationalism, the nationalism of the socialist. Yes, there is a tension. If in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, if you talk about socialist, it means that you were atheist, or you adopted an atheist form of analysis. Okay, which didn't work well with which didn't work well if you try to be progressive and socialist, and saying that, well, you derive your socialism from Marxism. Okay, who had this very secular towards atheist approach. Now, which means that if you were trying to be progressive in the 50s on the leftist or radical form, you were faced with, okay, but this is not in line with the religious thinking of the region, and therefore those who were counter-revolutionary used this fact to try to discredit any progressive movement or development in the nationalist form in an ideological sense, based on that. Okay, but if you're socialist, then you are not Muslim in faith, at least, and therefore the kings and the princes and those who were counter-revolutionary can use this kind of argument to kind of polarize the people. Now, the thing that was why Abdel Nasser was appealing was that he called for nationalism, yes, to kind of regain honor after defeat and dignity, but also that he didn't kind of subscribe totally to this kind of socialist approach. so that you would then say he would be on the position of having to defend why he's Arab, yet adapting a socialism, but he's still kind of Arab with some sort of faith. Yeah. Now his problems with the Ikhwan in Egypt was that the Ikhwan wanted to assume power and therefore adapt a theorized version of Islam by assuming that Islam would be like a theory, Marxist theory, that if you applied it, it would automatically reconfigure the whole society. So this is not kind of this is the challenge of the time, and the challenge still remains a challenge, is that how if you're going to have an Islamic system, how would it be kind of adaptive to kind of causality, causation, agency, and all this. So just the point of the leap, is that clear? Okay, so the whole point of reading this article about the review of the book is to make you aware that even the intellectuals, when they address nationalism, they do not always reach a methodological conclusion. Sometimes they are still captured by the aqliyat al-wasf, the mentality of description. They can have within the mentality of description some sort of analysis of what's going on inside the description, but the description itself is not penetrated beyond the analysis. And this is what you need to be aware of. This is the whole point of Aflaq and nationalism. With regard, it's one of the challenges of trying to achieve some sort of conformity within the region towards liberation. The other thing that I want to be, now, since we go to the counter-revolution, the first article about Saudi Arabia and why it adopted a counter-revolutionary approach was that it's the part of the Arab uprisings from Tunisia to 2011 and onwards kind of developed a sort of reclaim of justice and equality under the different political systems, and it took on an Islamic kind of tone. Yeah. Now, why say what is Saudi Arabia's claim is that it represents it claims a monopoly over what is Islamic and what is not Islamic by being the caretaker of Mecca and Medina. Okay. The problem is that the whole political system is the antithesis of such a claim, in the sense that you cannot, if you, as I described before in the Tawheed, you cannot claim to be a king if you're Tawheed. It doesn't work. It's a contradiction, and therefore you have a monarchy which was established by, let's say, the British after World War I, and favored, and which maintained links with the British and then the Americans for oil reasons. That then say that we are the ones who kind of should decide how Islam should be practiced in the region and the Islamic world. So therefore, you have this counter-revolutionary system, political system, which claims monopoly over how change in the Islamic sense should be shaped, and how it should take place and how it should not take place. And the Arab uprising, by taking a form of social justice, political justice, and having an Islamic interpretation, an Islamic people's interpretation of how the political system should be, reminds us of this kind of French Revolution, is that the politics became an issue of the people, in the hands of the people, rather than in the hands of the monarchs or the elites. And this is the tension that it kind of is parallel or kind of similar to what was going on in Europe, except that that has a geographical setting and a political dynamic which is different from the political dynamic that we are in. So in a sense, there are also, and therefore Richard Falk, when he talks about the different countries as well, he kind of highlights that the point being made, he's making, and others also make, is that unlike the French Revolution, which was happening in the summer of 1789, and therefore after that happening there was a change. In the Arab world, it is being read that it's a change that is going on for an extended period of time. So we're still in a period of revolution. It is not a one event happening, it is rather a sequence of events that is maturing, that could be maturing or could be maturing into something different. So according to Falk and others, this region is in revolution and counter-revolution dynamic. It is not one or the other. It is still coming out of this kind of interactive, confrontational dynamic. Yeah. And so, therefore, according to the analysis by some, that some would claim that the Arab Spring is a total failure. Arab uprisings was a total failure and brought more damage than benefit. This would fall into the discourse of those who claim that it is better to keep the bad states as they are, but have stability rather than have break up of the states such as in Libya and Syria. And those who promote this are mostly the monarchs, the princes, and the military dictators, such as in Egypt. Yeah, and it is interesting that the monarchs and the military dictators kind of become alliances, and the military of a country which once was which was revolutionary. And now has become part of the counter-revolution. Is it fabricated? Not necessarily. There were interventions, yes, but the whole, if it was fabricated, then it could have been predicted. The whole point of which surprised the region and those who were, especially, for example, the French, who kind of, I mentioned this before in a previous class, the French kind of determined, according to their assessment, that Tunisia was the model of stability for the next decade. Yeah, if it was fabricated, then there would have been more intervention at the time to try to control it. This doesn't mean that there were no attempts from the outside to try to channel it into a different direction. Yes, but that the whole claim was fabricated means that then, or that there was no legitimacy to call for social justice and economic justice in the countries in which there were uprisings. So if you say that the revolutions are fabricated, it means that also their claim to justice, social justice, economic justice, is also a fabrication, which is not the case. Okay. According to some analysis. Now, while some would like to claim that they were fabricated, so that they say, so as to say that the people are incapable of understanding whether they are live under injustice or whether they live under justice. And this is one aspect, and that the people are, when you give politics to the people, it gets into chaos, and therefore politics should be left best to the people who are in power, which is a particular school of thought which kind of eliminates agency from the people in general, and therefore assume that the people are ignorant and therefore underdeveloped and it is beyond their capacity, or mental and physical capacity, and even human needs capacity, to understand what it is to be under a just political system, and that there are more complicated factors affecting politics than common people know. That is a valid point to some extent, but it means that if you subscribe to this version of how politics is done, then it means that the ones who do politics and who affect politics are only the politicians, and everybody else is just kind of a consumer of politics and political decisions. It doesn't work well if you're a Palestinian who has to kind of assume agency and change politics, but with politics. Okay, and become and change even systems. Yeah, it is not. It doesn't work well with us because we are in a situation where we need to be able to have claim agency rather than submit agency to somebody else. Okay. What else? We go to Tarabishi. Okay, just a quick question. Why are you reading Tarabishi? Can you give me some reasons? About the faucet and the conflict between democratization. Yes, there is this also dynamic that you have an artificial state system which is introvert, in Arabic تعزيز القطرية على القومية الأوسع المفهوم الأوسع. Okay. Tarabishi, yes, to get a taste of what different philosophies of knowledge from Europe, the thinkers, and how the process of understanding how knowledge is made, produced, and developed in the West, as in addition to what Jabiri tried to do in his book about the Arab mind, العقل العربي. فبيجي الطرابيشي comes to critique the whole approach of Jabiri and puts it categorize it under a form of aqliyya, and that even how he analyzed this kind of development of thought and placed the Arab world as the antithesis of the enlightened world is problematic, and that he still maintained within the confines of mentality rather than an objective, analytical, rational approach, which is what Tarabishi is trying to do and trying to present. Yes, you can say that you hated Tarabishi, it's fine. But why I introduced Tarabishi to you is that so that you know that there is Arabic and there are Arab thinkers who are very kind of sophisticated and very advanced in the analytical analysis of Western philosophy of knowledge. And this is something you should know and something you should have to come to terms with in terms of readings, is that there are complex Arabic texts. It is not just the complexity is not exclusive to the Western philosophy of thought or theory or analysis. You have within your own cultural and knowledge baggage of the region, you have production of very sophisticated analysis and very complex text. So this is supposed to give you, how to say, confidence that there is that you have thinkers who are kind of very advanced and analytically capable of dissecting Western philosophy and thought and how it evolved. Al-Jabari, I think you need to see what Al-Jabari replied to Tarabisi. And I think Al-Jabari passed away recently. So in any case, the point is that you have an Arabic analyzing European philosophy and the evolution of European thought and the evolution of knowledge. Now, when we come to the specific texts, pages I told you to read, we'll take them a portion at a time. I sent to you this morning a PDF file of Tarabisi, which has the pages right before, from 93 to 98, which gives you a context of what Tarabisi is analyzing. And then we come to page 99, which I told you to read. Now it is in the middle of the paragraph there is in French, la raison que nous commettons est the idea that انه المعرفه او العقل اللي او العقلانيه اللي بيتم انتاجها هي جزء من العقليه الكونيه ومثل ما العقليه الكونيه غير خاضعه للتغيير والتشكيك، فبالتالي العقليه او العقلانيه المتبعه هي برضه زي هي ثابته زي كما الذات الالهي ثابت. طيب شو اول شيء في الريزون. هلا هون في استخدام reason في الفرنسي means what causes something to happen. Yeah. So there's within the word there is causality. In English la raison is translated into cause. So therefore the causation is an outcome or is a byproduct or product of sequence of events, reason for something to happen. And therefore the terms imply, the use of terms have the implications on what the context of the form mode of analysis is promoted. And لما تيجي للسبب تيجي السبب والمسبب أو الفاعل والمفعول به. Yeah. So here 2 points. The first point is that in French the reason it has it's a reasoning. It is عقلانية. So therefore the why things happen is part of implicit. There is a hidden rationality or rationalization of why things happen. Okay, and if the proposition is that if there's a hidden rationality of why things happen. If you understand the rationality of why things happen, you understand therefore the rationality of God. So therefore, the idea is that your mind, in a sense, if it understands the rationalization of what's going on in nature and can articulate that, it has therefore assumed a characteristic with reference to our kind of the underlying assumptions or kind of beliefs of the system of here is that the human mind cannot comprehend, at least from the Tawhidi point of view, the human mind cannot comprehend all the mysteries of the universe, and therefore what the mind can comprehend is what it was limited to the capabilities of the mind, and therefore that beyond the capabilities of the mind there's a larger universe that the mind cannot comprehend. Okay, here there's the proposition that no, if the mind can understand certain secrets of the universe, therefore it becomes almost godly-like, in the sense that it becomes part of understanding how, you had Stephen Hawking say at some point why he was if you know Stephen Hawking, he was the physicist who could only talk through the computer because he was on a wheelchair, but he wrote several books, and he says the understanding the mysteries of the universe is like it would lead you to understand the mind of the Creator. So this is a different approach from assuming almost bold to the point of audacious confidence in that the human mind is capable of understanding reality with the big al-haqiqa. And therefore, the evolution of how it follows is that the evolution of the philosophy of knowledge in Europe has led to this kind of merger in thought that if the mind is capable of understanding certain mysteries of the universe, it is therefore understanding the reality with the big R, and therefore if it has understood the reality with the big R, yani al-haqiqa, therefore the knowledge of that reality is in the West and in the methodology of the West, and therefore there is no other interpretation about what reality is. And this is very political. If a certain people of knowledge who claim that they have monopoly of what reality is with the big R, and they say that then to an extent they're saying that the universe is understood through us and we control what you should know your reality is. Okay, even if you're talking physics, even if you're talking kind of astronomy, astrology, all these areas of knowledge, it has political implications. It means that therefore your reference point to understanding reality with the big R, including your political reality, emerges from how a certain group of people within a particular evolution of philosophy of knowledge have claim over what you are experiencing, and therefore they understand more about you than you understand yourself. This is the implicit interaction. So while you're reading this, is that there's a tension. He talks about the tension between Al-Ghazali and Labranche. Okay, Malebranche. So some have claimed that Al-Ghazali, because he was the most advanced philosopher of his time in this region. Okay, but at some point he reached a peak point in his philosophy, rationale of philosophy of knowledge, that he kind of needed a mental rest. يعني عمليا انضرب. So he needed 10 years. انضرب فكريا. وصل لمرحلة إنه أو اكتشف إنه الطريقة المنهجية التوصل للمعرفة فيه خلل، وصدمة الخلل هذا جعلته يعتزل عن الفلسفة كليا، وغاب عن الساحة لحوالي 10 سنين. وبعدها لما رجع كتب كتاب إحياء علوم الدين مجلدات، اللي هي محاولة لإعادة فهم أو التواصل مع الحقيقة المطلقة من خلال الرقي النفسي والذهني والوجداني. هلا some critics of Al-Ghazali said that by doing so he ended the era of philosophical research and inquisition and philosophical inquiry and logical inquiry in the Arab world, and therefore he is to be blamed for all the takhalluf or the underdevelopment that has in thought and intellectual and human production of knowledge go back to him. So, but there's another school that says no, that he actually advanced it, but the form of advance would have had not only implications on knowledge acquisition, but it means implications on the political systems, and therefore, those who kind of built their careers on understanding the Greek philosophies and merging them with the philosophies of their time. Okay, so this is kind of one tension, and that then there's the other tension about, or the other point about causation, العلاقة السببية. يعني الغزالي شد أو the tension between Al-Ghazali and Malebranche is on page 99-200. Then we go to 201 and 202, in which he's talking about the causation, العلاقة السببية. Now the point here is that there are two propositions. One proposition is that if a human acts in a particular way or does a certain action, is it the human's will or is it the will of the divine? And therefore, if it is human will, then it is separate from the will of the divine, and therefore human agency can be interpreted as being above or beyond the divine agency, so to speak. Okay, and then there's the other discussion that says no, everything you do, even if there is human agency, is part of the divine will, and therefore the human agency is in effect not their own agency; it is something else is controlling them, which is the law of nature, or the nature of things. Now, here the Western philosophers kind of, some of them distinguish between, or try to relocate the philosophy of causality within the interpretation of scripture and the divine. And others kind of say that if you understand the secrets of the causality in the universe, therefore you understand the causality. You can understand the causality of the person, of the individual, and therefore if the causality of the individual is the same or is an effect of the causality of nature or the cosmos as a whole, therefore you can control the actions of the human beings if you understand the secrets of the nature. Is this point clear? This is very political. Very, very political in terms of the politics of knowledge. Who decides who knows what and how? And how does one know that one knows, and how does one know that one does not know? and how does one know the difference between both? Are you with me? Okay. Okay. So this is kind of the discussion on page 202 and 201 and 202. And then 215 to 220 it talks about the relationship between miracles and causation. So here there's the point being that there's some philosophers and thinkers kind of disassociate themselves from miracles, and that there are no miracles in nature, in the cosmos, and therefore everything in the universe is happening because there is a sequence of causation. Therefore, every happening has a rational can be rationalized. And everything, and those things that cannot be interpreted, just they need to find a way to rationalize it. Okay, so that is the role of scientific exploration and discovery. Now, if you are part of a worldview that yes, the knowledge is a means to understanding the universe, but you will never understand the universe in its entirety. And even if you understand the rationality of causation, you need to also include that there is the possibility of miracles to happen, which means a miracle is something that you cannot explain. Therefore, you cannot extract a causation sequence of a miracle, which is why it is a miracle. Yeah. So therefore, if you believe that there are miracles in addition to the causation, therefore it means that you cannot claim to strive. You cannot claim or strive to achieve monopoly over knowledge, of knowing, of being all-knowing. If you exclude miracles from causation and from your philosophy of knowledge, it means that therefore you kind of assume that you can reach a certain level of understanding the universe which is close to the divine. Okay? Which is, I'll leave it at that. So therefore there are two tensions. There's a tension in which if you're going to develop a form of knowledge production and understanding which is coherent with Tawheed, you need to factor in that there are miracles in addition to the causality. But the causality is not exclusive. It is not, doesn't become law as much as it is an interpretation of what is happening, but not a secret of understanding how things are happening at the time. For example, there's an example of if you have if you take cotton and put it on fire, it will burn. Okay, so if cotton burns, is the fire the cause of the burning? Here it is proposed, no, not necessarily. It could be interpreted like that, but it means then that the fire caused the burning, not the cotton being on the flame. And therefore there is a siyaq al-dharfi, that there is the contextual, the contextual or the circumstance context, the circumstance of context, and therefore the circumstance of context is that if you brought the cotton to the flame, it will burn, but the burning is not caused by the flame. It is the merging of two substances or forces or materials or tangible forces or kind of components, and then they work together and give a flame and give the burning. Okay. اللي هي العلاقة الظرفية في on page 206. But if we go again 15 to 20. explained that it is argued on 15 and 16, 17 and 18 and 19 that miracles are seen to be outside the context of natural laws that can be explained. Okay, and some philosophers would think in the West that okay, miracles have no place in understanding the universe. Okay. Now, yet in Western philosophy, in the group of Western philosophers, there are those who tried to kind of merge philosophy, Greek philosophy, and to make it have some uniform with belief system. Torabishi talks about Augustine, Thomas Augustine, who was a Christian philosopher of the 6th century. Before Islam, who tried to merge Greek philosophy with Christian teaching. Then you have Thomas Aquinas, Thomas al-Aquini, who came after Islam and after the church had kind of broken off from the Eastern church to the Western church in Rome, and therefore he tries to kind of bring back Greek philosophy into a form of a Christian belief system. Okay, so there are these attempts, and then Malebranche is also one who, according to Torabishi, tries to merge philosophy with the scripture and divine understanding, so as to merge, come with a coherent way of analyzing the world. Okay, are you with me? Okay, so far? Okay, then we go to 242 and 245, الذات الإلهي الجسد العقل والواقع. Before that, there's on 238, there is Hegel's quote. It is at the bottom of the page, of the paragraph, last 4 lines of the paragraph. فمع أن here's a philosophical proposition, okay? So therefore, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from bottom. فإننا سنتوقف فقط عند الصيغة الشهيرة التي أوصلت المفارقة إلى أقصى درجات توترها. This is philosophical. It is not rational. It's not logical. It's philosophical. فمع أن ألف ليس باء وباء ليس ألف، فإن ألف يساوي ألف لأنه يساوي باء، وباء يساوي باء لأنه يساوي ألف. وذلك هو المؤدي الظاهري لقول هيجل: ما هو عقلي فهو واقعي، وما هو واقعي فهو عقلي. Now, Aleph obviously is not Ba, but if Aleph is made to be equal to Ba, therefore Aleph is Aleph because it is identical, and Aleph is Ba even though Ba is different. Okay, and therefore Hegel's dictum or saying is that what is rational is reality, and what is reality is rational, and therefore it is almost as if you say that because you understand, you confine or you reduce the whole universe according to your mental comprehension. This is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that the whole universe is potentially available through your mind, mental capacity of understanding. Okay, if you assume, like Hegel, that what is what reality is, what you think, what you perceive it to be. Therefore, your reality is defined by what you are able to understand from it. And then you assume that your understanding of reality, if you have reached that depth of reality, is supreme reality, and therefore you're better than other human beings who do not understand that reality. Hegel, who's German, develops this kind of German philosophy of knowledge or understanding, develops in a way that the idea is that if you understand, if your mental capacity is the spirit, ruh, and therefore and your body is the embodiment of the maddi, jasad. Therefore, your spiritual capacity can also include the whole expand towards the whole universe, even though you're confined by your body. So therefore, your knowledge, your development of knowledge can assume a universal application beyond the confines of your bodily, of your body, and therefore your spirit can be assume a divine nature, which is not what the philosophers of the Tawheed kind of propose. It doesn't work like that. Then you go into shirk or fitna, at least. So when we talked about at some point during the early lectures we talked about أنسنة الغيب. كيف تم استبدال الغيب فيما يخص الذات الإلهي بالغيب المجرد اللي هو المعرفة والنظريات والفلسفة. In this sense, what happened in Western evolution of philosophy of knowledge is that what was of the other world, or what was of the divine nature, was reduced to the abstract notion of knowledge and sciences, and therefore that abstraction replaces the relationship with the divine, and therefore the construction of this kind of abstract way of understanding the world, the universe, and reality, and shaping reality and causality and all that methodology that is within becomes a way of actually creating and becomes assumes a characteristic of the divine, which is that you are actually partaking or in partnership with the divine in the creation. Now this has implications on philosophy of knowledge, and again, who has the monopoly over knowledge. So therefore, one of the tangents or the byproducts of such assumption is that you have those who claim then in West, from Western civilization, that because they have advanced forms of philosophy and mental capacity, that those who have achieved this advanced forms of mental capacity apparently have monopoly over how one learns about the universe. Now, in the Tawheedi, you adapt your mental faculties are part of interpreting your senses and your interpretation of what is happening in the universe, not only by your five senses, but also there is the fu'ad, and then there is basira and the akhir, which is what Ghazali develops, and therefore Ghazali in his Ihya Ulum al-Din, it was not just a religious practice.
form. It is a way of elevating awareness and therefore articulating this elevated awareness into interpreting in giving interpretations in language of things that could not be put in language before. And that is the challenge. Okay? Where the balance between causality and agency is, it is not. I don't think there is an answer to it. But in the Tawheed, part of your subservience of Islam is that you accept that there is something beyond your capabilities, and therefore you strive تجتهد حتى للرقي للفهم ومع اليقين انه مش هتوصل للمطلق اليقين او مطلق الفهم والمعرفه والعلم. And there is kind of comfort in scripture saying that وما أوتيتم من العلم إلا قليلا. So therefore, no matter how much you strive to, you cannot claim monopoly. Okay, which is not what Western philosophers and thinkers are claiming. They are claiming monopoly, and therefore this has repercussions and implications on whose knowledge is adopted and who has reference to knowledge beyond the causation and what is tangible. When we go to, there is reference on page 243, which is interesting, that Farabishi refers to as the Prussian political system and mind and the Napoleon mind. 243. You count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. On the 10th line. في ظل الدولة الروسية. But let me backtrack and read from the top. I will start from 242 at the last line. The second from last. فالحد الثاني الذي كثيرا ما يستشهد به ضد استعمال هيجل بنفسه له أي معقولية الواقع ليس إلا نتيجة للفكرة الثورية العميقة التي يعبر عنها الحد الأول أي واقعية العقل. وإنما بعد أن دخلت المسيحية إلى العالم صار العقل أساس العالم الروحي، وصارت هذه المعقولية مبدأ معرفة العالم. وإذا لم تكن الصيغة مبدأ هوية مطلقة. شو يعني الصيغة النصية في الكتب المقدسة، بل كانت على العكس متجذرة في التاريخية. فهذا معناه أن المطابقة ليست مطابقة معطاء ولا قائمة، بل هي صيرورة. So it's process. وهذه المشروطية التاريخية الحاضرة باللفظ في النص الجابري هي التي تغيب عنه بقدر ما يغيب البعد المسيحي مع النظام الطبيعة. في المذهب الهيجلي فالعقل أو الروح بالأحرى لا يتطابق مع نفسه عند هيجل إلا في التاريخ، وأكثر ما يكون هذا التطابق في التاريخ المسيحي، ويصل إلى ذروته في التاريخ الجرماني اللي هو البروسي، وتحديدا في ظل الدولة البروسية التي تمثل نهاية التاريخ باعتبارها أكثر عقلانية حتى من دولة العقل التي كان بالمقابل فإن العقل أقل ما يكون مطابقا لنفسه في الطبيعة، وربما من المسلمات الجبري ومصادراته وفكرته الوسواسية الثابتة عن العلاقة المطابقة الباقية دوما هي بين العقل والطبيعة، فإن العقل أو الروح عند هيجل لا يكون في الطبيعة إلا في حالة صياغة من نفسه وتفارق مع ذاته. So what is here there's reference that the German philosophy of thought evolved from after Martin Luther as well. So the Martin Luther, the emergence of Protestant faith in Germany also has a role in shaping the form of knowledge and the philosophy of knowledge there, the Hegelian version. So therefore, in Protestant faith, you can assume a certain divine-like characteristic, or you have certain divine-like characteristics if you subscribe to the teachings of the Bible, but also if you kind of develop your mental capacity, and therefore the merging of both bring about partnership with the Creator. Now, in our region, in the Tawhidi, this doesn't work. You cannot be partner with the Creator in creation. You are created, and therefore, by being created, you cannot assume creator capacity. Yeah, في عابد ومعبود، وفي خالق ومخلوق. ما في ولا في أي حالة ممكن المخلوق يوصل لمرحلة إنه يشارك الخالق بالخليقة. في التوحيد في مساهمة في إعمار الأرض، هذا شيء ثاني، بس مش في الخلق. ويعني برضه في النص الصريح بيقول ما بتقدروا تخلقوا ذبابة، يعني ربكم تخلقوها مع كل المعرفة الموجودة. طيب. So why then we have 248 الميتافيزيقية. The last paragraph from 248. ومن هنا مطالبة بالإشارة باشلار دفعا للاشتراك الألفاظ بالانتقال إلى من عقلانية تأملية إلى عقلانية تطبيقية بحسب، ولا من عقلانية مغلقة إلى عقلانية متفتحة بحسب، بل كذلك وأساسا من عقلانية إلى ما فوق العقلانية اللي هو suprarationalism, rationalisation. يعني بالتضامن، يعني هو التفكير ما بعد التفكير، ما بعد العقلانية، أعمق من العقلانية، اللي هو يعني زي برمجة العقل. السوفت وير بخلي الواحد the software that allows you to think and to analyze and to come to conclusions. So therefore here there's an attempt to try to tap into the secrets of understanding, of developing a knowledge of how to acquire knowledge. It is how to know how to know, which is metaphysics. Okay, why is it metaphysics? Because you can say that something weighs 1 kilo. Okay, and depending on the mass of the object, you can have a balloon that, if you want to gather 1 kilo of balloons, you would need more mass if they're inflated than, say, 1 kilo of metal mass. Okay. Now, it means that the 1 kilo is an abstract form of identifying certain characteristics of something which need not necessarily be similar, except in the unit that you are describing it with, which is the weight. Okay, and therefore, 1 kilo of say tomato or potatoes doesn't say, potatoes don't tell you that they have a sign that says it's 1 kilo. You need an instrument to kind of arrive at this abstract knowledge that it is 1 kilo. Okay, and therefore this kind of metaphysical dynamic of equations and units and measures and all these things are man-made language to try to understand and be able to combine units of material so that they produce a certain function, such as the combustion engine, such as the transferring steam power, the power of vapor from steam into motion. So therefore you're transforming one form of energy to another. And this is how you kind of mechanize this is how you mechanize nature, and therefore you're able to harness the components of nature, the boiling water into steam, and therefore the pressure that builds up in a confined space in steam then gives you pressure which, if you direct in a particular way, can give you motion and movement. So to design and engineer a machine that can transform water, steam into motion is a way of understanding the metaphysics of forces and causality within nature, so that you produce one form, you change the energy of one form to give another form of energy, such as motion. Pressure from steam and heat on water provides steam, and then pressure of the steam provides a direction of motion, which then triggers on a wheel, which can then give you maybe motion on a track or on a circular motion. Okay, so the whole idea of transforming this knowledge of physics and chemistry and mathematics into and using all these languages of derives from interpretation of nature and natural environment is a way of metaphysically producing something from nothing, what seemingly would be nothing, or by combining certain sequence of events, you would then arrive at certain outcomes which you pre-designed from the beginning. Okay, in this sense, you're harnessing nature to benefit, to your benefit. Now, similarly, when it comes to social sciences and philosophy, the idea is to try to, if you can harness the metaphysics of what makes people do things, then you've achieved a level of understanding of human nature in which you can then control other people and how they do and what they do. Okay, so this kind of philosophy of knowledge has a lot to do with how one is able to understand what is hidden in the actions and reactions and motivations of people. And this is very political. Okay. Then العلاقة العقلانية والسببية. I will jump a bit. 253 to 256. Last paragraph of 253. سؤال أخيرا وأساسي: ما العلاقة، أو next to the last، ما العلاقة بين العلاقة السببية وإذا كان العقل حسب التعريف الذي تبناه الجابري إدراك الأسباب. وإذا كانت الفرنسية وسائر اللغات الأوروبية قالت الأصل اللاتيني، ذات الأصل اللاتيني هي وحدها التي تجمع في كلمة واحدة بين معنيين العقل والسبب، فهل هذا دليل كافي أو حتى قرينة الاشتباه؟ هل أن العقل الغربي هو وحده دون سائر العقول الحضارية عقل السببي؟ هون بعطي نقاش ولو نيجي ل 256 وليس معرفيا كالعقل اليوناني، يعني عمليا اخذ سطر من 255 او ما قبل الاخير، وهذا المعنى الاخلاقي ستكون لنا اليه عوده في معرض مناقشتنا اتهام جابري للعقل العربي بانه عقل معياري وليس معرفي كالعقل اليوناني والاوروبي. ولكن بانتظار ذلك سنلاحظ بدورنا أن اللغة العربية تميز بين السبب والعلة، وتمييز اللاتيني بين كوز وراسيو، وتميز الألمانية بين جروند ويوراخ. فاعلة هي الحكم كما في الفقه والنحو، السبب هو الشيء. ورغم التداخل بين اللفظين في الاستعمال الجابري فإن الصفة المشتقة منهما لا تدع مجالا للشك في الدلالة المميز في كل منهما. فنحن نقول أن الرأي المعلل رأي معلل، ولا نقول رأي السبب كما نقول حريق مسبب، ولا نقول حريق معلل. فالتسبيب إحداث الشيء، والتعليل بيان للريعة والباعث والحشة. طيب هون إيش وبكمل إنه مثلا الفرنسي في ريزون اللي هو جزء من عقلانية، يعني مصدر كلمة عقلانية، وبيختلف عن كوز يعني هو السبب. وبقول هون طرابيشي بنتقد الجابري انه بتصنيف العقل العربي وكان معياري. يعني شو معياري؟ بس بيناقش شو الاشياء اللي حاصله مثلا في التاريخ، بس بسرد احداث التاريخ بدون ما يلاقي يستخلص العبر من التاريخ. بالتالي انه حكم على كل العقول العربيه وكان بحكم انه ثقافتها لغتها مقيده، انه بس بتوصف الاشياء ما بتحلل ما بتستخلص العبر من الاشياء. والطرابيشي طبعا بنتقد الجابري بالطرحات، بقول انه لا، في اللغه العربيه برضه دقه في بين العله والسبب. العله بعطي سياق الظرفي لحدوث شيء بدون ما بالضروره يعطي السبب. يعني انه كيف يعني مثلا السياق الظرفي انه اذا ضويت غاز في غرفه واشعلت الكبريتة راح يصير في انفجار مثلا. هذا الظرف. هلا العله بصفي انه لانك انت اشعلت الكبريتة صار في انفجار، لا بيكون في اشيين متواجدين في ظرف خاص اللي ساعتها بتتيح انه لما ضويت الكبريتة او اشعلت الكبريتة في السياق هذا صار في انفجار، بينما في السياق الثاني بس تشعل الكبريتة وبصفي اللهب محصور في الكبريت مش في المناخ الجوي الموجود. ماشي. ايش؟ بتصور I think it's enough for you. We will continue with العقلانية والسببية 253 to 256 and الفرق بين العقل والعقلية وفوكو next time, because that is how we will begin to understand what the Khafaji is talking. Okay? Any questions? You can open the mics if you want to talk directly. In the meantime, I'll take your attendance. May is here. I will see from those who are present. While I'm taking attendance, if you have any questions. Okay. تسنيم. Okay. سناء. Okay. نور. نريمان.
Here. I'm here.
Okay. محمد أيوب. Okay. مروة. Okay. ماهر أبو. Okay. محمد العسامة.
الله يسلمك أستاذ.
يوسف الخليل.
لا أنا ماهر معتصم اللي عارفه.
أوكي.
It's okay.
فادي. أمل. علاء إصباح.
نعم أستاذ، بس عفوا عندي سؤال. Is the casuality in contradictory with Islam? Because we know in the end.
Causality?
Yeah, the casuality السببية.
Causality مش casual شيء ثاني. عشوائي.
السببية. Because in the end of Islam we know that the Islamic, if we can say the Islamic age, yeah, they have a lot of discoveries in science, in chemical. So this is related to the Sababi.
Okay, but it's the difference is that it is not exclusive to Sababi. في علاقة سببية كأداة بس مش كمرجع مطلق. هون الفرق. التوحيدي في عندك علاقة سببية، في حتى تقدر تفسر بعض الأمور، ولكن تفسيرك لبعض الامور ما يعني انك انت وصلت لحسم مطلق، قد يكون متغير في ظرف ثاني انت لا تدريه، وبالتالي انت حاطط احتمال انه في اللي بتجتهد فيه ما بتزعم انه مطلق، لانه كل المطلق عند الخالق. وفي التوحيد ساعتها ما بتتجرأ انك انت تقول انه انا عندي مطلق المعرفه وعندي مطلق تعريف الحقيقه. بس هذا بيعنيش انك بتستخدمش ادوات توصل للمعرفه زي السببيه والعلاقه السببيه والظرفيه وبرضه المصدر. يعني بيقولوا خذ توكل، اعقل وتوكل. يعني في العقلانيه في بدك تلاقي علاقه سببيه، ولكن مش هو المفصل في الوصول للحقيقه الكبيره، هو تفسير واداه للوصول للتفسير. المفارقه مع بعض المفكرين العرب اللي ماخذين من الغرب او حتى الفكر الغربي انه بيقول لا، انه هذا مطلق، انه علاقه سببيه فقط الطريقه الوحيده للتوصل لمعرفه كمان الاسرار الكون والطبيعه. واذا فهمت الطبيعه عمليا انت فهمت الخالق استغفر الله العظيم. مع انه الطبيعه عندنا في التوحيد الطبيعه بما انه مخلوق لا يعقل ان يكون شيء ممثل عن ذات الخالق الالهي. ماشي؟ عند الغرب لا، بقول لك اذا فهمت الطبيعه واسرارها انت عمليا عم توصل للعقل الخالق. وهذا الادعاء هو ساعتها بولد مثلا بعض الاندفاع للاستعمار، انه مش بس